Right now, one organ inside your body is quietly burning through roughly 20% of every calorie you eat. It makes up only about 2% of your total weight. It is not your heart. It is not your muscles, even if you went for a run this morning. It's your brain, and it never actually clocks out. Picture it exactly as it is right now, sealed inside your skull in total darkness. It's drawing power almost continuously, awake or asleep, thinking hard or staring blankly at a wall. It doesn't matter. No other organ in the human body demands anything close to that kind of constant, disproportionate energy budget. And once you understand why, you'll never think about being mentally tired the same way again. If the idea of your own body running a hidden energy economy inside your skull is the kind of thing that keeps you curious, you're exactly who Brain Tenacity is built for. Stick around and consider subscribing. We're about to walk through exactly where all that energy goes, and why evolution decided this trade-off was worth making. Let's start with the number itself, because it sounds almost unbelievable until you see the mechanism behind it. The average adult brain weighs around 3 pounds. That's roughly 2% of total body mass for most people. And yet it consumes somewhere between 20 and 25% of the body's total energy intake at rest, according to widely cited estimates from neuroscience research. Compare that to skeletal muscle, which makes up close to 40% of your body weight. Muscle only uses around 20% of your resting energy. Pound for pound, your brain is burning through fuel at a rate roughly 10 times higher than muscle tissue. So where does all of that energy actually go? Not to conscious thought, which is the part most people assume. The overwhelming majority of your brain's energy budget, researchers estimate somewhere in the range of 80%, is spent on something far less glamorous but far more essential. It's spent maintaining the electrical and chemical readiness of roughly 86 billion neurons, so that any one of them can fire the instant it's needed. Here's the part most people never learn in school. A neuron at rest isn't actually resting. It's holding a carefully maintained electrical charge across its membrane, called a resting potential. Tiny molecular pumps constantly shuffle sodium and potassium ions in and out of the cell. Those pumps run continuously, using up roughly 2/3 of the brain's total energy supply on their own, according to estimates from cellular neuroscience. It's less like a light switch sitting idle until you flip it. It's more like a fleet of security guards standing at attention around the clock, ready to react in a fraction of a second, and burning fuel simply by staying alert. Then there's the signal itself, the part people do picture when they think about brain activity. An electrical impulse races down a neuron's length. It triggers the release of chemical messengers called neurotransmitters across a tiny gap called the synapse. That process, repeated an almost incomprehensible number of times per second across the whole brain, is metabolically expensive in its own right. Some estimates suggest a single thought or perception can involve millions of these synaptic events happening in coordinated bursts. Each one requires its own small packet of energy. This is usually where the story would stop at "the brain is a hungry organ" and move on. But the more interesting question is one neuroscientists actually debate. Why would evolution ever settle on a design this energy-intensive in the first place? Especially in a species that spent most of its history a few missed meals away from starvation. The leading explanation is sometimes called the expensive tissue hypothesis. It suggests that as human ancestors evolved larger brains, something else in the body had to shrink to pay for it. The body's overall energy budget couldn't simply expand to match. Some researchers point to a corresponding reduction in gut size across human evolutionary history. That shift, paired with a dietary change toward more energy-dense, easier-to-digest food, potentially including cooked food and more meat. The idea is contested and still actively studied. But the underlying tension it's trying to explain is universally agreed upon. A brain this expensive doesn't just happen by accident. Something else in the evolutionary budget had to give. And that expense didn't stop mattering once our ancestors survived long enough to pass on their genes. It shapes your daily experience right now. It explains sensations you've probably had without ever connecting them to metabolism. Consider why intense mental effort leaves you feeling drained. Studying for hours, working through a difficult problem, sitting through a demanding negotiation. All of it in a way that's hard to describe as purely psychological. Some researchers have proposed that sustained cognitive effort can lead to local dips in available glucose in the specific brain regions being taxed most heavily. The exact relationship between mental fatigue and blood glucose is still debated among researchers. It's clearly not as simple as your brain literally runs out of fuel. What's better established is that your brain has essentially no significant energy reserves of its own. Unlike muscle, which can store glycogen locally for quick access, brain tissue depends almost entirely on a continuous, moment-to-moment supply of glucose and oxygen. That supply comes delivered through the bloodstream, non-stop. Cut that supply off completely for just a few minutes, and the consequences are immediate and severe. This is precisely why a stroke, a sudden interruption of blood flow to part of the brain, can cause permanent damage within minutes rather than hours. That fact alone reframes something people tend to take for granted. Your brain isn't just your most important organ in terms of what it does. It may be your most vulnerable organ in terms of what it needs, every single second, without interruption, for as long as you're alive. Sleep adds another layer to this story that surprises people. You might assume the brain, like most of the rest of the body, powers down significantly during sleep to conserve energy. It doesn't, not in any straightforward way. Certain brain regions actually show energy consumption comparable to waking levels. In some phases, particularly during REM sleep, the stage most associated with dreaming, consumption runs even higher. Meanwhile, sleep appears to be the window during which the brain runs a kind of maintenance shift. It clears out metabolic waste products through a recently described system researchers call the glymphatic system. That system was first characterized in detail within the last couple of decades. Far from an energy-saving shutdown, your sleeping brain may be running one of its most metabolically active maintenance operations of the entire day. So why does any of this matter to you personally, beyond being a strange biological fact to repeat at dinner? Because it explains something practical. Mental fatigue is real, physiologically grounded, and not simply a matter of willpower or discipline. Your brain is functioning on a tightly managed, moment-to-moment energy supply with essentially no backup reserve. Things like consistent meals, hydration, and adequate sleep aren't just generic wellness advice because of that. They're closer to keeping a demanding, always-on machine supplied with the specific, continuous fuel it was never designed to store for later. It also reframes what thinking hard actually costs you, biologically speaking. The exhaustion after a long exam, a difficult decision, or a mentally demanding day at work isn't purely in your head, so to speak. It may be one of the most literal examples in human biology of an abstract experience. Feeling drained is tied to a measurable metabolic reality happening in real time inside your skull. Scientists still don't have a complete map of exactly how this energy gets allocated moment to moment. They don't fully know which regions get prioritized under different kinds of mental demand. And they don't know precisely how much of subjective mental fatigue is caused by local energy shifts versus other factors entirely, including changes in neurotransmitter levels or simple motivational shifts. This remains one of the genuinely active frontiers in neuroscience, not a solved problem with a tidy answer. But the core fact holds up against decades of research. You are, right now, running one of the most metabolically expensive pieces of biological machinery in the known animal kingdom. It's tucked behind your eyes, working around the clock. And it never once sends you a bill for it in any currency you can actually see. If that's the kind of fact that makes you want to know what else your own body is quietly doing without your permission, that's exactly the appetite this channel is built to feed. Subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into the science hiding in plain sight. Tell us in the comments what you think your brain is spending the most energy on right this second, because there's a decent chance the honest answer is stranger than you'd guess.